HM2 Goldthwait, first name McKinley. I'm with H&S Company, 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. 24th BA, we were just going on a bunch of exercises in EURCOM. It just consisted of pulling into different ports and doing different operations. My role with H&S Company mainly was just maintaining the ship and practicing emergency situations with COB, who we were attached with, as well as ship's medical in case of emergency situations. Yeah, we stopped in quite a few countries. The one that I actually got to work with, though, we stopped in Saudi Arabia for about a month time, where we worked with the Saudi Arabians medical team, did a lot of training with airlifts and teaching them our medical training as well. Some good experiences were we were just kind of like teaching each other our different trauma ways that we do as a corpsman, like teachable C training and stuff like that. We got to meet them. They brought us in a lot of like cool medical equipment that they use, and we taught them how to use all of our stuff as well. Yeah, I do remember we were currently on port in Bahrain, and we had gotten on the ship on our last night, and we were all pulled down to the medical bay. All the corpsmen were pulled down to the medical bay, and they were just telling us that we need to start packing up all of our gear. We were giving a packing list and told that we were going to be going into Kuwait on standby if they needed us to pull into Afghanistan. We didn't really know much about it. I didn't really hear about it until we were told we were going into Kuwait. I knew there was like an uprising. We were being told about the embassy, how they were trying to evacuate the members of the embassy, and that things were getting hostile with the Taliban in the country, but we weren't really fully aware about it until we were going into Kuwait. Like nothing was getting told really. I mean, I was nervous, but like this is why I joined. Like I wanted to go with the Marines since I joined as a corpsman. Like this is like a life experience I had been waiting for. You know, I never necessarily want to like go into bad situations like that. Like I would never expect it, but you know, I was excited a little bit to get out there and do my job and like experience something like this. Yeah, absolutely. We trained forever, you know, and to be able to implement that training and get those real world experiences was something I was excited for, you know. The first day going into Kabul, I was attached to CLB 24 as part of, like, we called it the female engagement team. And I don't know if it was labeled like that at the time, but all the females were arranged into a group so that we were able to search the females due to like their customs and courtesies in that country. And so we got the 48-hour warn-out that we were headed in. And so, you know, we were at the airport in Kuwait waiting to load the planes. And once we were on the planes, we didn't know what situation we were going into. We knew that the rifle companies had been trying to control the airfield at that time due to the refugees like flooding the airfields. So when we were on the plane, we really didn't know what situation we were going into. So in the back that C-17 dropped, we all, you know, we were prepared for anything that was gonna happen. So like walking out on that airfield, like you just look around and you're surrounded by mountains and stuff, and you're waiting for like the refugees to flood the aircraft. Luckily that didn't happen for us. We were able to get off the aircraft and off the airfield very quickly, and to where we were going to be staying throughout the night. And from there we were split up into 4 groups and deployed to the gates at that time. I mean, there was refugees everywhere. Everything was moving pretty fast paced. Like as soon as our gear was down, like we were on the move to the gate. I just remember like getting off the plane and you could see the mountains surrounding you. And like my first thought was like, this is a pretty bad scenario to be. Like we're in the middle of a mountain range, built up cities around. Like there's opportunities for snipers in different situations. So like that was my first thought. I was like, we're in it. Yeah. It was in the first week, and I think they started pulling out when we started slowing the gates down. I think for the first few days, the gates were crazy. We were constantly pulling in refugees and like thousands of them. And then as soon as we started slowing down at the gates, we were having to close the gates more due to the influx. We were holding too many people on the base, and it was constantly changing who we were letting in the gates. And you just started to see them pull out the less people were pulling in. Right, absolutely. Yeah, as soon as we got off the plane, we went right to where our quarters were going to be. We split up our teams, and we were deployed right out of there, right to the gate. My group went right to the north gate after that. We had a senior officer and a senior enlisted. I had Staff Sergeant Solis with me, and I had Lieutenant Southern, both Marines attached to the female engagement team. And then it was a group of, I think it was about 6 or 7 other lower enlisted that were with us. And then one female corpsman was deployed with each group of the female engagement team. The first day, it wasn't bad. Like it wasn't what you were expecting. You thought it was going to be hectic and everything was going on, but really it was slow and calculated. The Marines at the gate were doing a great job of like filtering all the people coming through. There's always a lot more female and children, so we were pretty busy with just dealing with all of them. There was a lot of stress and confusion going on with the refugees, so it's hard to handle that. A lot of emotions through the refugees, and just trying to get in the groove of how we were going to conduct these searches and the process of getting them in the gate as fast as we can and as safely as we can to the terminals to get them out of there. As the days progressed, we transferred. So we did, it was about like 10 hours at one gate, 10 hours at, and then a few hours of rest, and then we go to another gate. So we started off at the north gate, but every day we did a north and an east gate rotation up until those gates closed. So we would go back, we would do like hygiene, eat, whatever we needed to do, and whatever you wanted to do instead of sleep. So you were choosing if you needed to do hygiene and eat or if you wanted to sleep before you got sent back out to the other gate, the east gate. And we did that rotation on and off until the gates closed. The ratio was definitely off. I remember joking with the male Marines, like, oh, you guys have it like so easy over there. You know, we have females like coming through the gate and they have up to like 4 or 5 children each. And these females don't travel alone. They have their other like female companions and stuff like that. And then not to mention all of their like bags and everything. Like these people, you could see like the difference between the north and the east gate. The north gate, you could tell were like the poor people, and then the east gate where everyone, like they had suitcases and all this gear we were having to go through. And so it was like every rotation at the gate, you were just nonstop going. There was no break. Well, as soon as you were done with the group, they were bringing in another group. And on top of that, like you have women that don't want to be there. They don't want to let you touch them. They don't like Americans. And the other times they're just so thankful that you're there. They're crying. And I mean, it was a little bit stressful at times because you're just constantly going. There's not a lot of time for sleep. There's not a lot of time for food. Our females worked very hard, and, going through those bags, it's like, it's a little scary. We were going to find, there was definitely times where we would be tested, finding different things like weapons. There was drugs we would be finding. There was perfume bottles with wires sticking out of them, almost like it was like a test for us to see how thorough we were being when we were doing these searches. And on top of all that, like being the corpsman in the group, I was dealing with the environmental stress put on these people, like being outside the gates for 5 days straight waiting to get in the sun. They have limited food and water. They're coming through with heat injuries. They're coming through with injuries inflicted outside the gate, whether it was like riots, getting trampled on. They couldn't even sit down while they're out there. So now I'm like searching females and children, but also I'm trying to treat them as they come through the gate with limited resources, stuff I can't use on them because I have to save it for my Marines in case of an emergency situation. So it was a lot of stress working both sides of that job. Right. It was frustrating, you go in there and we're there for a non-combatant situation, right? And you're looking at these people who, have targeted and killed a lot of like our brothers and sisters for so many years, and it makes you angry to see them. And then, like a couple days in, we're getting told we're working with them. It was like a slap to the face almost, being at the gate and seeing them and how they treat the people on the ground. And it's so morally wrong that you're getting angry working that closely with them. Like they're firing off shots, they're scaring the crowds, they're threatening if you give food and water that they're like going to engage with you because it's starting riots. And they're set on controlling the crowds that they're pushing out of their own country, so you're just it was hard to work with them, to look at them every day. And I'm sure it was hard for everybody that wasn't there who had fought for them, like fought against them for years, to see us working with them to close out Afghanistan. Some memories that stick out to me from the North Gate are definitely a lot of the patients I had. A lot of the injuries were inflicted on children, stuff like that. I had a lot of children with facial injuries or head injuries due to like riot control agents and stuff like that, or the ANA and the Taliban were coming through. They weren't the easiest on the people outside the gate. So a lot of the children I was treating, it was hard. But these children were the toughest thing I've ever seen. And my Marines, the way they handled these children, Like, it just, like, makes you want to smile a little bit. They, like, treated the children like their own. We were under a lot of stressful conditions at the North Gate, like, constantly under VBID threats, stuff like that, hanging out behind the walls, in case the VBID did actually go off. Seeing my other corpsmen out there, the stress that they've been dealing with, they were the front line for all the patients coming through there. And a lot of the time, those patients either didn't make it or were just forced outside the gates because they weren't allowed in at the time. And you don't know what condition they were going back out of that gate. When you had the ANA at the gates, they were closely with us more than they did the Taliban. The Taliban was always like a couple meters off, where you had the ANA that were right at the gate with our Marines. I never saw them like corresponding or talking or anything at the time. Our rotation was about 8 to 10 hours at the gate, and we would go back to, we had a building that we were currently staying in. It was just a small room we were all like piled up in. LAR was also in that building, and we had just all of our packing gear there that we didn't bring to the gates with us. In our off rotation, we were getting about 4 to 5 hours of sleep if we weren't doing hygiene and chow. Chow was continuous at the gates. Whenever we could fit the time in, we would rotate off of searching people if we had the time to, eat. And then once we were done with that rest cycle, we went to the next gate, and it was continuous day and night. The environment of the crowds was, initially we had started outside. We had 2 barricades at either the north and east gate, and we were working outside those barricades for the most part. We had concertina wire up to control the flow of the crowds on the left and right sides, and in front of the crowds was only a small opening to let people in, where the Marines initially and us as the females initially stood to cycle in the refugees. That quickly changed when, after we first got there, the first couple of days, and the crowds started to get bigger and bigger. We ended up having to barricade, to put up those barricades and even support them with JLTVs to keep the gates from being pushed open. So we had mass crowds, several hundred people at a time, flooding these gates at one time. And we were only letting in, 10 people at a time. So people were stressed. People were running each other over. There was no place to sit or eat or sleep for these folks outside the gate. And our Marines ended up having to pull inside the gate for the most part because it was getting too dangerous outside of it. A lot of the common injuries were environmental stress, so like heat injuries. I had a lot of heat stress victims, and aside from that, like my lower cases, I was looking at gunshot wounds, lacerations due to I don't even know honestly what caused them, but a lot of lacerations, puncture wounds, the gunshot wounds. Sorry, I'm trying to remember. There's a lot of them. A lot of them were also due to people not having their medications. A lot of older folks were coming in. I had a lot of pregnant women who were under a lot of stress. We had a couple, we almost had to deliver a couple babies at the terminal. And a lot of people just malnourished, a lot of babies not eating. I remember being at the North Gate, and I had one of the Australians come up to me because, the Marines call us Doc. And so they're confused. They're like thinking we're doctors. Their medics are thinking we're doctors. And, they're bringing up babies to me that are very lethargic, non-responsive, and thinking that we can do something for them. And we didn't have any formula or anything to give these children for the first week. We didn't have anything to give them. So a lot of the babies didn't make it due to their moms not being able to breastfeed because they were dehydrated. And they didn't have food, or the food that we were giving them they weren't used to. So the most stressful gate that I worked at had to be the north, was the constant threat of VBIDs, and the crowd there was a lot worse at times. I mean, both of them were very stressful and very hectic, but the North Gate, I think we had a harder time. I think that was closer to the outside walls. It was closer to the town that we were surrounded by, and it had a lot of free moving roads next to it. Like, you had a lot of trucks coming up and down those roads, which gave us those VBID threats. They would park the trucks outside the gate. It allowed Taliban and other, whoever else it was, to just pull right up to that gate, right up to those crowds. I got moved back to the BAS after the gates closed. There was no longer a need for the corpsmen to be attached to the female engagement team because we could be used elsewhere. We had a comfort area with about 6,000 refugees in holding, waiting for transport to the terminal because the terminal was already full. And in that, we had 2 separate areas. We had an area to your left that was no cover, no nothing. It was just about 3,000 refugees in this area just waiting. So, you know, they kind of built their own cities in this comfort site, and we were there to provide medical care to all of them. A lot of them were faking medical care to get transported faster to the terminal. They knew there was medical at that site. A lot of them were like the pregnant women, the children, again, follow-up wound care, and a lot of them were, you know, just basic illnesses and sicknesses that these people had. I had a patient I sat on for about 3 days who had seizure episodes, and she didn't have medication. So I was constantly trying to treat these people with the little medical supplies that we had. There were maybe 2,000 casualties at each gate, where we had an STP set up by CLB. And then at the comfort area, we had about 6,000 refugees at one time in that area, with about 10 corpsmen and 2 medical officers rotating in and out there at a time. I would say I personally treated probably close to 1,000 in my time, maybe more. It was a lot. I just come off a rotation at the terminal where I was monitoring. We had about 2,000 refugees at this terminal. We were getting ready and prepared for sticks, so I was just preparing them. I was out of the corpsman capacity at that point. I was just preparing them for their flights, making sure that they were still with their families and they had the authorization to go on these flights. And I had just gotten back to the BAS, and we immediately moved into cover into one of the bomb shelters near the BAS that we had set up. And we were waiting there, and we had no idea what was going on at the time. And, you know, we eventually got pulled out of cover, and we had Marines coming into the BAS. They were going to be supporting that tower. They were held as security. We were told that ROEs had changed. And at that time, they were telling us, yes, there was an attack at the Abbey gate, and that there was a corpsman involved, and they wouldn't tell us who the corpsman was because they wanted us to stay focused. So at that point, we had no idea who the casualties were. Not all of our corpsmen were in the BAS that were usually there. So we're panicking and trying to see where we can go to get to help out. We knew that the SDP was near there. We know CLV 24 was on the scene as far as corpsmen go, and our medical officers were often leaving the BAS. They were leaving the BAS, going to the role facility that we had there, and treating the Marines and Afghanis that had been pulled from the bombing. I can't remember any specific landmarks that you would even know associated with it, but about a half mile from each gate. We could walk there easily in about 10, 15 minutes. Yes, at the comfort area, there was a lot of riots we had. People were confused. They were told that once they were going to come in, it would be a smooth, fast process. I don't know who told them that, but there was riots. They're mad at us. They're like, why are we here? They wanted to get moved to the terminal faster. They just didn't understand what was going on. Why were they being kept in this comfort area for days? And they barely had cover and stuff like that. So there was a lot of anger and confusion going on. They were very angry at us as Americans. So a lot of the times they were pushing back against the Marines, trying to figure out why they weren't getting transferred. A lot of them wanted to just be let outside the gate. They didn't want to be there anymore. So oftentimes there would be trips to release them back out if it was approved. Every day it was a constant struggle. I know 10th Reg was the one controlling the comfort area at that time. They were the unit doing that. Some leadership that stuck out to me, I would have to say Staff Sergeant Solis and Lieutenant Southern, they kept us going. You have constant stress and hours of operations that these females are going under, and we were taking on so many of these refugees, and they kept us running. They made sure at all times that we were good to go, that we were mentally and physically prepared for what we were going to have to do that day, often relieving us at times to take over our job, to make sure we were getting the rest that we needed. Every night they brought us back. They checked on us. They were the support we needed. They were awesome at all times. So when we were retrograding, it was everything had slowed down. After that, we had done the funeral for the folks we had lost. We had put them on the plane, and from there we went back and we packed up all of our stuff, packed up the BAS, all of our medical supplies, and we had moved to another compartment with the rest of the folks that we were going to be getting on the C-17 flight with. From there, we hiked to the airfield, and we slept at the airfield for about 12 hours, and eventually got our flight out of there. It was very slow paced. We were the last unit there. Nothing was really going on. The base was pretty much empty. We were just trying to get out there as fast as we could, because I know the Taliban, we had set a mark, and they were starting to get a little restless about us still being there. So at that point, it was just like a hasty get out of there situation. None of us really knew that we were going to be, like the leading role in this. And whether we were or not, I don't know. I was too low at the time to really know what was 100% going on at the time. But like 1-8 went in there and crushed it. We didn't know. I mean, we trained for it, but we trained for it like in 30 days. We did all that. And we went in there and crushed it. And I've never seen like people work together so well. I just remember all my girls that I was with and the other corpsmen I was with, and how well they did. And I know a lot of them went home with the problems of it, but they crushed it. Like, we had our NEO training, we had our rules of engagement training, and then we also had riot control and search procedures, what we had to do. And the females, we had a additional training with the courtesies and customs of that country, is what we're allowed to do with those females, make sure they have coverage to respect their religion from the males, and protecting them from the males while we had them, because a lot of them didn't have that protection outside the gate. So making sure once they got through, they were safe, and we followed their customs. The largest non-combatant operation, I didn't expect it. When I was in there, I didn't realize how large scale it was, because you didn't expect it. When someone tells you you're going in to do this, you're like, oh yeah, okay. So when we left, and it was all over the news, it was the largest evacuation, it was all of this, and you're like, and it doesn't hit you yet what you were a part of. I don't think today it still hasn't hit me. So transitioning and seeing everything on social media and stuff like that, everything that was said about it, you're like, it kind of doesn't feel real that you were the one that was there. It kind of feels like two separate things at that time. So I was advon. I came back early, faster than everyone else. So I came to set up everything back here for the medical side of it. So I was transitioned out of it pretty quickly. Kuwait, there was a lot of downtime after the operation. They wanted to give us rest. I mean, they checked in on us. We had lots of trainings and stuff like that to make sure we're good. But for the most part, we slept, and we sat down with a lot of the others, and we talked about what happened. When we got back to the States, it was such a quick transition that it almost feels like it didn't happen, like it was a dream that you were there, because everything feels so normal back here. Everything is changed, but at the same time, it's still the same. You go back to the same job you had before deployment. So it's hard to realize that you had just done that. And there was like a lot of anger, I guess, afterwards. I didn't know much about 1-8 when I was attached to it. I had just wanted division orders. I didn't even know I was going to get infantry. This is what I joined for. So when I got 1-8 orders, I was ecstatic, and I started to learn everything that 1-8's been involved with. It's a heavy hitter battalion. We've done a lot in history. In my opinion, it's the best battalion. I love this unit. I'm sad to leave it. We got a lot of flack from coming back. I'm still gonna say we're the best, though. From what I've heard, I know I may be biased towards it, but we've done a lot in history, and this is just another one in the books for us. I learned about it as soon as I got to the unit. We have an FMF pin. It's the pin I wear. And we have to learn a lot about the Marine Corps, and most of the time they make it unit specific, right? So we have in our books, we have history lessons, and one of those lessons is 1982, 1983, Beirut, the bombing. And we do a lot. 1-8 does a lot with the Beirut veterans. Every year around the date, October 23rd, we actually do an event where we run 241 miles for the Marines and sailors that were unfortunately killed in Beirut. And we have a ceremony at the end of those 72 hours where we run those miles for them. And it's a constant, we constantly have like ceremonies for them, and we're always involved with them. Even this year, it's going to be big. The 40th anniversary is this year of that event. So we're going to be doing the 241 miles again to remember them in that ceremony. I didn't know her that well. We weren't on the same ship. Um, I knew Lanehart and Lewis a little bit more, but Lewis was the one she was a friend of Lanehart and G. So I knew her very well when working with her at the gate. I only knew G and Lanehart in passing. They were awesome. It was good. We did training exercises with them in Kuwait, as the engagement team, but they ended up getting split from us. We split up the vet teams. Yeah, Sergeant G and Lanehart, they were amazing women. They crushed any job they were given, especially on the engagement team that they're on. Like, they constantly train for everything. I definitely looked up to them as females. Like, they were cool. I'm just a doc. I'm down here treating the Marines if I need to, but they're like, female Marines are something else to be like reckoned with. So seeing them operate was incredible, but losing them was, worse. You don't want to see that ever. I think they could be honored just by, not forgetting what they went through. August 26th is coming up. It's the 2-year anniversary. And I think we can't forget about what happened that day. It's still fresh in a lot of people's mind. I know they are honored. They're remembered every day by everyone that was there for them. And just like learning from the experience. You know what I mean? Just remembering why they, what they sacrificed for. They weren't the first, they weren't the last that are going to have to sacrifice for this country. Yeah, I just talk about them too. Like, some people are there. We reminisce. We like laugh and joke about some fun memories that we had from there. We just talk about the different experiences. I'm sure everyone's sick of it listening to us talk about it at work and stuff, the people that didn't get to experience it. But just being around the people that we went through it with is really important, keeping in touch with the folks that we went there with. I think even if we lose touch, we're always going to be able to reach out to each other. Yeah. I guess they can support us. Everyone can support us just by, I don't know how to say it. It's like just being there. Like, you don't have to be every day, hey, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? But just like keeping in touch with us. And, I think a lot of people, I'm sorry, you're probably going to have to take this out, but they can help us out by, just being there. We don't need people just like coming in and smothering us. We just need the support to know that what we did over there was not a negative thing. Like, we went over there and crushed it. We went over there and did our jobs. We did the best that we could do as a unit. And just knowing that it's not talked about negatively and stuff like that. Supplies and knowledge. I was operating pediatrics, pregnant women, like recognizing the signs and symptoms of malnourishment. And a lot of these children were lethargic most of the time. So like understanding how to get them like resources and stuff like that for food. Like, if I ever had to do this again, I would have a list of stuff we need to have. Like, it's absolutely, you cannot go in there without it. And then also like looking from a supply standpoint, like running out of tourniquets. You never want to run out of tourniquets. But at the same time, like, if you run out of tourniquets and your Marines go down, like, what are you going to do? So it was a struggle learning to save resources for the right thing. I can't, like, what patient gets what resource, what patient gets what extent of care. And like, you're basically picking and choosing how far that patient's care is going to go before you're dipping too low into your resources to the point where you can't protect your Marines if you had to.